Вітаю, мене звати Юрій Фізер, і сьогоднішній мій гість – це дуже цікава людина. Це канадський американець з величезними українськими серцем і душею. Це людина, яка в перші дні повномасштабного російського вторгнення в Україну врятувала десятки українських сиріт. Це людина, яка молилася перед зустрічю тоді ще кандидата в президенти Сполучених Штатів Америки від республіканської партії Дональда Трампа. Перед зустрічю, під час якої на нього було скоєно спробу замаху. І, можливо, це людина, яка врятувала життя Дональду Трампу своєю молитвою. Хоча ні, Бог через цю людину врятував життя. Це священник Української католицької церкви, парох парафії Святої Трійці у місті Carnegie, штат Пенсильванія, Jason Sharon. Father Sharron, greetings and thanks for joining me today.
Дякую, Юрій. Це дуже великий привілей. Слава Ісусу Христу, слава Україні.
Слава навіки. Father Sharron, so before we start talking about all those things I have already announced, I want to clear for myself at least how come that you, a person that was born in Canada and lived in Toronto area and then moved to the United States of America, and I do understand that there are a lot of Ukrainians living in the Toronto area, but still they are in minority. And I do understand that there are Ukrainian churches there, but still they are in minority. So how come that you have become not just the priest of the Roman Catholic Church, but of the Ukrainian Catholic Church, the church that we here in Ukraine call the Greek Catholic Church? How come? Were you somehow affiliated with this church before, or maybe you were affiliated with Ukraine, and why Eastern Rite?
Yeah. Well, thank you, Yuri. I had as much to do with Ukraine as I had with Mozambique or Rwanda or India. I had no connection to Ukraine. But when I accidentally discovered it, God is behind all these things, I could not get enough of it. It was a richness and a beauty that I had never known in my life. I was studying to be a Roman Catholic priest, and I went over to Ukraine to teach English in 1998 through the Ukrainian Catholic University, and I was so impressed by her people who had suffered so much. I was so impressed by the depth of their faith, the richness of their culture, and their fearless heroes amidst a horrible system of oppression, that I knew I could not just admire it, but I had to join it. And the beauty of her tradition far exceeds the beauty of what we have here in the West. We've lost our roots. We've lost our direction. And Ukraine has been able to preserve those ancient and timeless truths. And they were gracious enough to receive me.
So, as far as I understand, you were not thinking about whether it would be Roman Catholicism or Eastern Catholicism, Ukrainian Catholicism. You decided it would be Ukrainian Catholic Church, yeah?
Mm-hmm. Yes, no doubt about it. And beauty attracts the soul. And the West, the West has, since the French Revolution, attacked our traditions and our most beautiful monuments. And for whatever reason, the Ukrainian soul has an attachment to beauty, lyrical beauty in poetry, in song, in iconography, and it is a refuge in a storm. And I think the West needs Ukraine as much as Ukraine needs the West at this point in her own history.
How many times have you been to Ukraine?
Oh, probably 10.
Mm-hmm.
I lived there for 3 years in the late 1990s, during the time of President Kuchma in the late 90s. And then I left around the year 2002. And I didn't come back until 2012. And people said there'd never be a revolution again. That opportunity from the Orange Revolution was lost. And they were stuck with a slow slide back into Moscow's orbit. And little did we know, a year later, 2 years later in 2014, everything happened with the Maidan. And here we are now in the struggle, an epic struggle for Ukraine's very life. But then I went back on the first day of the war to rescue the 23 orphans, and then I've
Father,
gone
we'll
back a
talk
number of
about this
times.
in details later, but right now I would want to ask you one more question. I know that you are married to the Ukrainian woman. Would you please tell us a few words about your family?
Yes. So she helped me fall in love even more with Ukraine. When I went there to teach English, I met my lovely wife Helena from the Червоноград area, Sosnyuka, and we were married in Lviv in Shevchenkivsky High, and we had 2 of our 7 children born in Lviv Oblast, and since that time we've relocated to Canada and now the United States. But it's through her example and her encouragement that I've been able to serve as a priest in our Ukrainian Catholic Church.
And may God bless your family. Father Sharron, okay, let's talk about what you have already started to tell. Let's talk about your, I would call it rescue operation, rescue mission. You already said that at the very beginning of the Russian invasion into Ukraine, you came to Ukraine to rescue Ukrainian orphans. Would you please tell us in details, what was it?
So ми маємо в нашій парафії, ми маємо багато американців, і вони не мають ніякої української коріння. І один з них, вони хотіли адаптувати дитину з України. And we were helping them, going through this adoption process. And then the war started. And what happened is this man in the parish, he and his wife, they had promised one of these children that if anything bad were to happen, they would be there for that child. And when the war happened, this man who does not speak any Ukrainian, does not have any Ukrainian blood, he said, their fight is my fight, and I'm going over to rescue those orphans. They were right in the line of attack from the Russian forces coming from the north. They were in the Kiev area. So we had a very, very narrow window, and everybody, as you know, Yuri, was evacuating from Ukraine as much as possible through into Poland. And that moment, we drove to the airport, and we got on the first airplane we could, and we flew from Pittsburgh to Helsinki to Warsaw. We took a taxi right from the airport, and we drove 3.5 hours, 4 hours to maybe more, I can't remember, to the border with Ukraine. And we were the only people going into Ukraine, except for one other human being. And opposing us were hundreds of thousands of people trying to get out. And that's when we knew that this was perhaps nobody knew what was going to happen, but we decided at that moment that it wasn't important, our own life, our own hopes. What was important was to get in there and to do what we promised we'd do, is to rescue those orphans. And we just prayed that God would assist us in this work.
How many children in total did you rescue?
There were the 23 orphans, and then there were about 17 children with their mothers. And they were not orphans, but they wanted to get to safety as quickly as possible. So all told, there were about 45 people.
And so after you came to this orphanage, you took these children and their mothers of some of those children, and where did you take them then?
Yes, so at that point, Yuri, it was very, very difficult to get out because of the flood of humanity that was trying to get out through Poland. The only way we could even think of it was a bus, because buses were given the green zone access, where they were prioritized. We could not go in individual cars. We didn't have the ability to do that. So I was able to call up friends from when I taught in Ukraine back in 1999 to help me get a bus. And we had a very heroic bus driver who wouldn't take money. We just paid for the gas. And we decided that it was in the best interest of everybody to not wait with all these children at the border in Poland, but to go through Karpata into Slovakia. And that's where we went.
And so you went to Slovakia. And where are these children now?
So they are all over the place. What happened is we got to Slovakia, and then the goal ultimately was to bring them to America to stay here until the war finishes with their guardian, their legal guardian. We went to the ambassador for the consulate, the Ukrainian consulate in Krakow, Poland, and we met with him, and we said, we want to do what's in the best interest of these children, but we want to do it in accordance with the law. And he said, you know, what you've done is wonderful, and on behalf of Ukraine, we're very grateful, but you cannot take these children overseas. They need to stay near Ukraine. So the guardian of these 23 orphans had a relative in Lithuania, and they stayed in Lithuania for almost a year, about 8 months, I believe. And then when the war subsided, they were able to go back to Ukraine, and then they've since been placed with a number of families who have been able to love and care for them.
But is it possible that they can be adopted by some Americans someday? For example, as Divan you were talking about, that was adopted by the member of your church.
Perhaps one day, and my understanding, Yuri, is, and you and your viewers would know better than I do, but як я розумію, іноземці не можуть основати дітей, поки війна є. Як той війна закінчує, тоді той процес може розпочинати від початок знову. Але поки війна є, це неможливо.
Well, I hope that after the war will end, they will be adopted. Maybe here in Ukraine, maybe somewhere abroad, but they will be, because they need it. Father, one more question about this rescue operation, let me call it this way. You didn't tell anything about your daughter, but I saw many your interviews in YouTube, and you said that your daughter was also involved in this mission.
Unbeknownst to me, she about a day before I was returning back to America, she left school. She's at the university. She left the university. She got on an airplane to be with these orphans as they went to Lithuania to make sure that they would be safe, to help their guardian, to help the gentleman, Alan, who was helping with and financing a lot of the expenses. And he subsequently made about 10 trips to Ukraine to help with Ukraine. But yes, my daughter Sophia, I'm very proud of her. She subsequently came also into Ukraine, and she went to Lithuania. She helped many people as well. She had to go into Ukraine to help some elderly people who could not get out on their own. She helped them with their medication, their documents to get across the border to safety. I'm very proud of my daughter, Sophia.
And we are very proud for your daughter also. Actually, we are very proud for everything you do for us, Father. Okay, let's talk about another thing. You were asked to have a prayer, to make a prayer before the beginning of the rally in Butler, Pennsylvania. That was that day when then the candidate for the presidency of the United States of America from the Republican Party, Donald Trump, was there was an attempt to kill him. and you were praying before this rally. How come that the organizers of this rally invited you? Because as far as I understand, Donald Trump is evangelical, he's a Protestant, at least what I read and what I know. And they invited not just Roman Catholic, the biggest Christian denomination in the United States of America, not the evangelical pastor, but they invited a priest from the Greek Catholic Church, Ukrainian Catholic Church. How come?
Yes, well, Mr. Trump is not a stupid man, and he is a very wise, very intelligent man, and his campaign staff are informed, and they knew that Western Ukraine Western Pennsylvania has a history of 130 years of Ukrainian immigration. And so it wasn't just me. There was a Ukrainian Orthodox priest that they asked to open their rally. They had another Ukrainian Greek Catholic priest at another rally. And they asked me for whatever reason. But they're aware that the Ukrainian Catholics, they love tradition. They're aware that Ukrainian Catholics make up a lot of the population in this part of the country. And so I think that's why they asked me. They wanted to demonstrate that they are for the same values as Ukrainian Christians, and they wanted that to be reflected in all of their three main rallies in Western Pennsylvania.
Father, what did you say in that prayer?
I pray that we might make our nation great again, but that comes through God's grace, and it's through God's grace that our nation will be protected, set right, and with our nation being set right, we can help our world get right again. But without God's grace and His Holy Spirit, this nation cannot overcome the present crisis that it's in, and we need that grace to overcome all the crises and violence and attacks that are directed against our country, our families, and the world. And that was my prayer. And providentially, some other things happened that day as well.
So about those other things, Father Sharron, can we say that God saved the life of then candidate for the presidency of the United States of America, Donald Trump, through your prayer? Because St. James in his epistle, chapter 5, verse 16, writes that the prayer of the righteous person is powerful and effective.
We priests are worthless servants. We're like clay, vessels of clay that God can use and He can dispose of. And we make that promise when we are ordained, that we will serve God as He wishes, not as we wish. And yes, I believe that it is through the uplifted hands of a man of prayer that great things are able to happen. And I believe that happened on that particular day. And I'm not ashamed to say that. I told people that in the crowd as much. They asked why I was leaving a little early just before he was shot. And I told people with the Secret Service and the media around, I told people my job is over, which was to pray for his protection. But their job is to continue the work of prayer because it saves people and it saves nations. I told them that they had to pray because there are people who want to shoot him.
Mm-hmm. Father Sharron, did you have a chance to talk with Donald Trump at that time, at least a little bit?
Yes, I did. Yes.
We spoke
about what I can tell you is we spoke about Ukraine, mm-hmm. and we spoke about we only had a very brief moment, maybe 2 minutes, but I spoke with him and we said, Mr. Trump, you were not given enough credit with Ukraine for what you did for Ukraine in your first administration. You provided the Javelin missiles that were instrumental in Ukraine's defense in her first week of the war. You gave them access to training with NATO troops. You gave them ships in the Black Sea, these smaller ships. You did many things like this, And I'm grateful to you for that. And I would ask that you consider extending and continuing that same policy of supporting Ukraine in your second administration. And what he said to me is, thank you. Um, and he said, if I were president, this war never would have happened. But to have peace, we need to have strength. And that's what we want, is we want America to be strong again so that our allies will be secure. And that was basically our conversation.
Father, one more thing about this event in Butler, Pennsylvania. Donald Trump, in his inaugural address on January 20th, said, this is the quote, "Just a few months ago in a beautiful Pennsylvania field, an assassin's bullet ripped through my ear. But I felt then, and I believe even more so now, that my life was saved for a reason. I was saved by God to make America great again." Was it the reason?
I believe so. I believe that God uses people like he used Cyrus in the book of Isaiah. And he's used many rulers throughout history to affect his purposes. And we see this, I think, with Donald J. Trump, is that he, a sinner like the rest of us on planet Earth, is being used by God to make our world, our country and our world great again through instituting laws that protect life and family, and not just here in the United States, but throughout the world. He's pulled back funding for abortions, which is we have war today in Ukraine because of abortion. We have the threat of nuclear war because of abortion. It is the trivializing of human worth. And if the womb of a mother is not safe, then nowhere on planet Earth is human life safe. So he has been used by God, I believe, to advance the gospel of life and the rights of family. And the events of that day confirm that in my mind as a priest. And those events are that I am a priest that's founded a nonprofit entitled the Holy Protection Pokrov of the Mother of God. And the purpose of that is to promote Mary's role as protectress. And he did not know that. His team did not know that when they asked me to pray that day. But that's what I talk about when I give talks, is the role of Mary as protectress. And what happened is that this was also on a day involving the role of Mary in history, because it was July 13th, 1917, when she came to the shepherd children in Fatima and gave a prophecy that Russia would spread its errors around the world. And it was on that day that I spoke with him about Russia's errors. And right across from where he spoke is a shrine, a little taki shopka, kaplitsa, to this very same devotion of Mary, Our Lady of Fatima. All of this happening at the exact same time that it is a day dedicated to Mary. It was July 13th on the Roman Catholic calendar, Rosa Mystica. So all of these things happen on this day. And it was on that day in 1980, also on the 13th, May 13th, of the actual Feast of Fatima, when a bullet also grazed the body of John Paul II and almost took his life. Also a Marian day. So it connected with Fatima. So all of these are signs that not only is God involved in what's happening here, but in a very special way, it's Marian and it is prophetic for world history. And Ukraine is at the center of it. America is at the center of it. And we're living in special times.
So we can say that Donald Trump is really I wanted to say God's elect, not just God's elect, God chosen president, yes?
Well, I mean, it certainly seems that God's hand is on the affairs of men at this point. And I don't want people to think that everything that a politician does is approved by God. You see that, Solomon was approved by God. But then Solomon was very wise, but he proceeded to turn against God and turn against the very wisdom that God gave him. So yes, I do believe that the hand of God is upon Donald Trump. I do believe that God is using him for good, but I also believe that our obligation is to continue to pray for him. As St. Peter tells us in the Bible to pray for the emperor, we pray for him that he may continue to rule with wisdom and knowledge and faith, because if he turns from the gift of wisdom that God has and the protective power that God has put over him, as we saw on July 13th, then bad things can happen. And we don't want that for anybody, for our country or for the world. So yes, I do believe that God's hand is upon him, but that means that we need to pray even more that he respond to the graces and the wisdom that God gives him, and that he not squander them, but that he continue to use them for the good of our country and for the good of the world.
Father, let's talk a little bit, just a few minutes, about the hopes Ukrainian people have for Donald Trump. You personally believe that Donald Trump will be able to at least help to end this brutal Russian war in Ukraine?
I do believe that, and I believe this against the words of some of his strongest supporters in his circle. Some of his strongest supporters in his circle are not supportive of Ukraine. Tucker Carlson, J.D. Vance has said things that are not helpful. Others in the conservative media have not been friendly towards Ukraine. But I listened to Vice President Mike Pence 2 days ago, and he is convinced, as am I, from my conversation with President Trump, that he will be helpful to Ukraine because he is not a radical isolationist like some of the people in his circle. He believes that all nations desire prosperity and desire freedom. And that's what he seeks. And Ukraine is an ally of ours, an ally in freedom. And I don't think he's going to abandon our allies. I think that he would see that as a sign of weakness, like what Biden did in Afghanistan. And there's no way that President Trump wants to repeat the template of President Biden by abandoning our ally. So I do believe, despite some of the people who are around him, that he himself will decide to stick to Ukraine, to honor the Budapest Memorandum, and to give an example to the whole world that if you're friends with the United States will be friends with you.
And we really do hope that he will be able to end this war, and we want this to happen as soon as possible, but who knows? We'll see. One more question. There are a lot of people right now in the United States, Ukrainians, who fled from the war at the very beginning of the Russian invasion or maybe later, and some of them maybe live in the area you serve as a priest in the Ukrainian Catholic Church. Does your church somehow has a contact with these people? Do you somehow help those refugees from Ukraine that are in the United States of America?
Yes, so we've helped, my wife and I have helped sponsor about eight people to come. Many others in our network have also helped to sponsor people. Our help to them is to get them on their feet when they arrive here. There is no help in welfare of giving people everything they want. That doesn't help them. It harms their dignity. So we believe that the greatest help we can give is to bring them here till the war finishes, and then help them with the language. And that's what my wife does, is she gives hours and hours and hours to help them learn English. And then we put them in touch with people, and they often find people on their own for employment, for housing, and then they're on their own feet. And that's the great dignity, is to know that you are working with the gifts God gave you, to provide for your family, and they don't need handouts here. And I don't, we don't give handouts. We help them when they need help, but you never do for another what they can do for themselves. So we help them get here to get on their feet for employment, language, and housing, and then they're on their own. And this is the great thing about this country. If you come here and you want to work, you can provide for yourself and your family. Ultimately, our great desire is to have them go back to Ukraine so that Ukraine will not disappear from the face of the earth. There is a real demographic problem in Ukraine, as you know, and Ukraine will not be helped in the long term if all of her people leave. We're here to help you in the short term, but we need other countries inspired by the example of America to grow up all around the world, starting with my beloved Ukraine.
Thank you very much, Father, for your help and support, for everything you do for Ukraine and for the Ukrainians, for Ukrainian people. That's very nice of you. But one more question. You know that here in Ukraine, we often hear that people in the West are tired of the war and they want the war to end as soon as possible. And I do understand them. But what people in the United States, I mean Christians, Catholics, not just Roman, but for example, in the Ukrainian Catholic Church, what do they think and say about the Russian war in Ukraine now?
Well, it's most people, let me first start by saying people in general are tired of the war. I mean, as Ukrainians are tired of the war, everyone's tired of the war. It's not in the news cycle as much now as it was in the first 3 months of the war. It was the main news item for 90, 100, 120 days. That's not the case anymore. People have largely forgotten about the war in Ukraine. But those who are aware of it are very much tired of it. They want it to end. And we see that, the giving is down. People would give a lot of money to help with aid to Ukraine, and that's just not happening anymore. People are tired of it. So yeah, I think it's just fatigue, war fatigue. I mean, no one's more tired of it than our men and women in the army in Ukraine. But at the same time, Yuri, I want your viewers to understand that there are two wars, and we're tired of one war. You are tired of another war. There's the war that everyone sees, that Ukraine is bleeding right now. That's the physical war. But Ukraine has to understand that there is another war waging right now, and that is the cultural war of the West and what Donald Trump is fighting against, and many people. And it's a war against our dignity, a war against family, a war against God-given sexuality. And Ukraine is susceptible to that. And that war is now coming to your own people. We have a problem here where we turn 8-year-old little boys, 10-year-old little girls, and we give them horrible chemicals to change their sex. And it's a sin against God and against nature. It's a horrible thing. And these children's lives are ruined. It's called transgenderism. This is a form of ideological, cultural, religious war. And my fear for Ukraine is that once this physical war against Russia finishes, and it will finish, and people will wholeheartedly move and embrace the West and unsuspectingly move into the arms of the culture war that's enveloping Europe and America now. And they will uncritically accept all of these horrible, damaging missiles, these missiles that attack the mind and the heart of human dignity. And you see that with gay marriage, with attacks on children's dignity, with parental rights. Ukraine has to be ready. This war with Russia will end, but then they will have to enter into the ideological, spiritual war against the family and against the Christian faith. And that is going to be an even bigger war.
Father Sharron, thank you very much for joining me today. Thank you very much for telling everything you tell. And thank you very much for all the help and support we are getting from you. May God bless you personally and your church and your family. And anytime you are in Ukraine, feel free to come to visit us here.
Щиро вам дякую. І я б хотів, щоб ви всі молилися за Україну і за Америку, щоб ми могли бути разом.
Ми так і будемо, отче Шарон. Я вам дуже дякую. Ну що ж, на цьому будемо завершувати. Сьогоднішній мій гість – це священник Української католицької церкви із міста Карнегі, штат Пенсильванія, отець Джейсон Шарон. Це людина, яка дуже багато зробила для України. Це людина, яка врятувала десятки українських сиріт з одного із дитячих будинків, які були на початку російського вторгнення у Київській області під обстрілами з боку російської агресивної варварської армії. Це людина, яка молилася за Дональда Трампа перед зустріччю тоді ще кандидата в президенти США від республіканської партії, під час якої на нього було скоєно спробу замаху. А на щастя, він пережив цю спробу. Можливо, якраз через молитву. Отець Джейсон Шарон. Ну що ж, на цьому у мене все. До зустрічі.